Então, assim, tudo que vier para cá, presta atenção o tempo inteiro que a gente vai construindo pouco a pouco o porquê é que você tem um poder muito maior do que você imagina. Aliás, você não. Você e a sua tribo, o seu círculo, a sua crowd. Para quem não fala inglês, sabe o que é crowd? Vou explicar para vocês. Acabei de chegar da Califórnia. Falo mesmo. Cheguei da Califórnia. Crowd é o bando, a turma, o turmão, sabe aquela muvuca? Então, assim, o poder que tem você e a sua muvuca de fazer a transformação que você quer ver no mundo. O tema é esse. Inovação de muitos para muitos. Já não é mais tempo de heróis. E a gente vai trazer aqui para o palco uma pessoa super legal que sabe falar disso como ninguém. Ou como muito poucos. E eu acho muito legal porque no tema de bem-vindas ela é uma mulher. Vai começar já abrindo com mulheres, né? E ela faz o quê? Enquanto muitos de nós saem buscando inovadores em grandes organizações, ou heróis, ou empreendedores sociais fantásticos, ela vai procurar inovação onde ninguém imagina. Ela está lançando agora no Brasil o livro dela que chama A Economia dos Desajustados. Ou seja, você. Ela escreveu isso para você, está sendo lançado em português aqui no Social Good, então você vai se sentir incluído. É uma pessoa que consegue ver inovação em piratas. Não é Bill Gates, Bill Drake, não, ela vai ver inovação em piratas e outras coisinhas parecidas. Vou chamar ao palco a Alexa Clay. Enquanto você recebe as palmas de vocês, e ela vem subindo, vamos acompanhar. A Alexa está lançando o livro Economia dos Desajustados. Ela é uma das cofundadoras do movimento Wisdom Hackers. Então, os hackers, a sabedoria dos hackers, olha que maravilha. E também cunhou termos como intraempreendedorismo e sustainability. Já está pronta? Você fala português? Um pouco. Então, assim, eu sou fellow Shaka, sabia? I'm a Shaka fellow.
Sim.
Yeah, so give a hug. Thank you so much. Up to you.
Thank you so much. Beautiful. Wow, loud. So it's amazing to be here. I'm excited. I've been introduced to many of you misfits already, and I'm excited to meet more of you. I want to start by really sharing the purpose of this talk, which is to explore innovation on the fringe, to look at innovation outside the walls of the cubicle and go into the informal economies and the black market economies that I've been researching for the past 3 years, and share stories of how gangsters and pirates and hackers and Amish camel milk farmers are innovating. So this is some of the ground that we're going to cover. And maybe before we start, a little bit about my own personal story and background. So both my parents were anthropologists. My father actually did a lot of work here in Brazil. He worked with indigenous people and connecting them to big brands like Ben & Jerry's and The Body Shop and building some of the first fair trade supply chains. And he was very much going against this trend in anthropology at the time that was more about the preservation of indigenous people and looking at opportunities for livelihood generation. And so I always grew up with this example of someone that was going against the grain of what was popular at the time. And then my mother was even more of a misfit. So she went around the world as an anthropologist and spoke to people who thought they'd been abducted by aliens. So throughout my childhood, I met some very esoteric people, and I was terrified about this idea of aliens as an 8-year-old, whether or not they exist, this difference between fantasy and reality. And then part of me also had this little ego moment of like, well, if there are aliens out there, I want to be abducted. I want to be the chosen ambassador of the human race. That sounds great. But I never did get abducted. Instead, I developed this ability to talk to people who might make us uncomfortable. And this is something that I apply in all of my work and around this idea of inclusive innovation, that we have to get out of the bubbles that we're living in and speak to people who are on the margins, people who are disenfranchised from the system. And so I went from this very esoteric upbringing into the corporate heart of darkness. After all this childhood development, I started working within the context of Fortune 500 companies, developing sustainability strategy. And within these ecosystems, I discovered what was sort of a lost tribe, social entrepreneurs, people that were incredibly innovative, had this entrepreneurial mindset, but were bringing a social and a political and an environmental agenda into companies. And they were culture hackers. They were going against the grain. They were trying to transform business models. People like Dave Burdish at Ford Motor Company, who was getting this huge automobile manufacturer to think about urban transport solutions that were sustainable beyond just getting more cars on the road. He also pioneered the company's human rights practices. And so I met more and more people like this within companies. And so we started building a community of these misfits, these insider rebels. And the result of this was something that appeared a little bit like Alcoholics Anonymous. It was a place where people could come and they could sort of have this coming out moment as misfits. They could share their agenda, they could share what they were working on with peers in very different kinds of companies. And they could find this personal strength and resilience. And so as part of helping these people, we really tried to distill the key practices that you need if you're going to be a misfit fighting the corporate's immune system. That you need to know how to game the system, how to navigate the corporate politics. You have to know how change happens within your organization. Different from the entrepreneur, to be a successful intrapreneur, you have to let others run with your idea. If others see your idea as their own, that's part of what it means to scale. We also looked at ideas of making the business case, so not just talking about things in a social good language, but really connecting social good to the priorities of the company. And for me, this was really a moment of transition. How much do I really invest in people within old institutions? How much do I believe that these old institutions can be transformed from the inside? And so I did what any smart person maybe in finance would do. I took a hedge, which is to say I didn't just want to work with intrapreneurs, with insider misfits, but I wanted to work with people on the fringes. So I started working in social entrepreneurship and then really looking at grassroots innovators, people completely outside of the system. So for example, in 2013, there were horrible floods in Thailand, and all these citizens got together to build these prototypes, these completely do-it-yourself systems and tools made out of recycled materials for navigating the flooded coastlines. And then they started appearing on a blog, and so citizens would go on this blog and look at all the different kinds of innovations that they could make to deal with flooding. I also spent a lot of time with Amish communities. I don't know if you guys know the Amish or the Mennonites. People who are basically living mostly in the US and also a little bit in Mexico that I discovered recently, but they have a completely different model of entrepreneurship. It's really built in the community, and so they totally changed this narrative of the Silicon Valley Lone Ranger kind of entrepreneur and really believe in collaborative and community-based entrepreneurship. Another thing that the Amish do that I find really interesting is they're slow adopters of technology. These days, we're all sort of plugged into these digital technologies. I go to startup conferences, and some of these technologies, I don't know they're high or good. I don't feel that they have an important legacy in the world. And so for me, I started doing this strange little misfit experiment of dressing up as an Amish woman and going to startup conferences and trying to get people to really think about, well, Well, mostly to induce an existential crisis, to get them to think bigger about what is the impact they want to have on the world with the technologies that they're developing. So this is really one important subculture. Another thing that I learned starting to do this research of the black markets was the shadow economies are part of the story of capitalism. So for example, we often think of McDonald's as being one of the originators of the franchising model. But in fact, before McDonald's, we actually had groups like the Mafia and Hell's Angels, gangster organizations that were scaling through these types of approaches. Or look at video streaming technologies. So it was in fact not Hulu and Amazon and Netflix that pioneered a lot of these video streaming technologies. It was people in the porn industry that were using video streaming first. And so this was really interesting, and here's a video that you can see just some of the different misfit personalities that I covered in my research.
No breakers. One law made, 100 laws made to break it.
Beautiful. So there you can see just some of the different personalities that we looked at and covered in the misfit economy. But I want to note that our ambition here wasn't to glamorize violence or criminal activity. Our ambition was really to shine this spotlight on people that we never hear about, people on the fringes. In some countries, more than 60-70% of the economy is informal. So how do we look at these people who never get written about in Harvard Business Review or aren't studied in business schools and begin to develop insight around some of their approaches, around some of their entrepreneurial spirit? And the result of this was a book, The Misfit Economy, which today comes out in Portuguese, launching here, which is exciting. And it was also a show that debuted on Nat Geo, a show called Underworld Inc. that inspired this look at black market economies around the world. And we've really tried to use old and new media to bring the spirit of this book into some of the marketing campaigns. So we did a lot of graffiti stickering around New York City and around different places in the US. We trolled the internet and tried to find the best spam letters by different Nigerian spammers that we'd ever seen. And then we made up our own perfect spam letter that we sent to all of our friends. So be careful if you get my email. You could get one also. And then we had our friends send them to their friends. And so this was part of the launch of the book, is to use some of these different devices. And we also brought in a lot of these individuals into spaces too, traditionally not occupied by these people. So at our book launch party, for example, here we had David Victorson, who smuggled 37 tons of marijuana from Colombia to Seattle. And then after he got out of prison, he started a legal business building rehab clinics and made millions of dollars. In the middle, you have George Young, who is not as attractive as Johnny Depp, but Johnny Depp played him in the movie Blow. So he's notorious as a big-time sort of cocaine kingpin, working with Escobar and others. And on the right, we have King Tone, who I'll share a little bit more about later, but was one of a really inspirational leader behind the Latin Kings, a Hispanic street gang across Latin America in the US. And so part of what we've tried to do, they were all on this panel talking about entrepreneurship and what startups can learn from some of the skills that are used in the black markets and informal economies. And so we've tried to package this knowledge more and do workshops and give them platforms to share some of the lessons that come from populations that are really disenfranchised. It's important to remember that a lot of these guys started off very poor, that criminal activity not only gave them an identity, but it also gave them a livelihood. And so one of the key themes that we look at in this research is around the idea of hustle. I think there's a Portuguese word for this too that the translator is probably saying, but this kind of gambiologia sort of instinct of like work around, do it yourself, always finding a way to make it happen. We looked at another principle of hack, and so these are all different lessons or insights that misfits use in these black market informal economies that we actually see cropping up more in mainstream systems that are part of the agenda for those trying to hack cultures. And when I say the word hack, I'm really not talking about it as a form of, penetrating malware or going behind computer systems, but looking at hack as an ethos, as this ability to try and transform the cultures that we're in, to transform institutions and make them fit for the present moment, whether you're in government, whether you're in the private sector, whether or not you're in grassroots or civic organizations. If you find yourself running a criminal enterprise, how do you pivot that and refresh that and repurpose some of that infrastructure for good? The next thing we looked at was this idea of copying, which is you see all over the place in the informal economy, which is copycat handbags, copycat pharmaceutical drugs. And we really looked at how copying in many ways is a good thing, how it's bringing down prices, how we should be less precious about intellectual property, and how there are really interesting collaborations emerging around shared ownership types of things. And then we looked at this spirit of provocation, which is a great misfit characteristic, and anyone who studied philosophy can attest to this, but just the simple question of asking why. We spoke to activists, to performance artists, to people that regularly try and shake people up, shake people into awareness about important issues. And then lastly, we looked at the spirit of pivoting, which is not pivoting an organization, pivoting a business, but looking at our own personal journeys. How do we take these personal pivots in our lives? How do we leave some of the old organizations behind? Or how do we have the courage to bring some of these agendas into those organizations? And so that was a common characteristics that we found with grassroots innovators, with people that were insider misfits, was this ability to bridge worlds and to take risks and to jump into new opportunities. I want to start with a very simple example and look at the spirit of hustling. Hustling is an instinct that cuts across both the informal economy and the mainstream economy. So when we think about many entrepreneurs, we have this portrait maybe of Mark Zuckerberg, this sort of Facebook young, hoodie-wearing, Harvard dropout. But in fact, so many people that used to run drug businesses, for example, or people that are in prison systems are hustlers. They have this incredible entrepreneurial energy. They're just on the wrong side of the law. So one of the people that I spoke to really early on in this research started an organization called Defy Ventures. And she had a bit of a double life. She worked in private equity and venture capital, And then on the weekends, she would go and volunteer in prisons. And what she found was that the people that she was meeting in prisons had amazing entrepreneurial skills. You know, one of my first conversations myself with a gangster, he said, don't even call us a gang, call us an organization, because we do recruitment, we do retention, we manage our brand, just like any other type of organization. And so part of the instinct here is to say, how do we humanize some of these different actors? And the point of Defy Ventures was really emerging from connecting prison populations with investment. How do we set up an incubator so that these entrepreneurs can actually be plugged in to the formal economy? How do we transform their hustle, recognizing that they have all of the skills that can make them incredible entrepreneurs, but they just need greater access to resource and connections in the mainstream economy? So I mentioned earlier King Tone. His whole story was one that profoundly transformed how I saw criminals, because he was the CEO of the Latin Kings. He inherited really this leadership after one of the deadliest periods of the gang's history. And he tried to transform the gang. He basically said, what if we turned gang organizations into civic movements? What if we use gang organizations as part of a way of doing labor organizing, as part of a way of doing apprenticeships and teaching important skills? What if we use gang organizations as ways of doing civic activism? And so some accused him of doing a vicious greenwashing campaign, but many others were really moved by his methods and saw that actually gang organizations in many different iterations were just a way for a certain class of people to gain access to economic opportunity. Another example that I wanted to share was just this divide. We're talking a lot here about inclusive innovation. And one of the things that has struck me the most, I've traveled all around the world and gone to many cities, and it's always interesting because on one side of the city, you have this amazing tech hub, impact hub, co-working space, this wonderful kind of entrepreneurial landscape. And on the other side of the city, you have slums, you have street hustlers, you have this informal economy that has absolutely no access to any of this resource. And so part of my mission moving forward is asking this question of how do we create bridges between the informal economy and the mainstream economy? How do we give some of the resources, give access to informal populations and give them access to some of these cutting-edge entrepreneurial resources? The next thing I want to look at a little bit is the spirit of hacking. And hackers for me are really interesting because in an age when, we were talking about this earlier in fact, where so many people go into work and want greater meaning and greater purpose and greater authenticity and don't want to live with these authoritarian regimes. They don't want to be part of these command and control bureaucracies anymore. And so for me, hackers provide a way of learning about principles of decentralization. The hacker group Anonymous, for example, has a completely bossless system. Anyone can take action within Anonymous, and then that action can become a meme that others take forward. But there's no one boss, there's no one person in hierarchy. And I think this spirit of egalitarianism that's animating a lot of social movements is something that we need to apply to our organizations. I mentioned Johnny Depp before, but you also see this in pirate communities. So in old school pirate communities, before Western democracies were created in European nations, you actually had pirates that governed themselves through democratic charters. They had ways of sharing income too that were also more egalitarian. And so some of these types of alternative models are the ones that I'd love to see mainstream business using more of. There's another great example of a bit of a reluctant hacker or insider misfit. This is someone who is also an Ashoka Fellow who spent over 15 years working on curing infectious diseases, tuberculosis, malaria, HIV, and AIDS, worked all across Africa, And then, as many people within the social change space do, he got burnt out, he got exhausted. He was too much Mother Teresa, too much a martyr. And so he went back to Chicago and didn't know what to do. He really took a time out. And what he realized, just reading the paper very casually, is he started paying attention to how violence broke out in the urban city of Chicago and around the US. And studying these patterns of how violence breaks out, he realized that violence spreads exactly like how infectious diseases spread. That violence doesn't spread because someone's a bad person. It's actually a learned behavior that is contagious. And so going with this idea that violence is contagious, he started treating violence like you would treat an infectious disease. He brought this model of community health outreach workers and started using this to create this troop of violence interrupters, so people that are called into neighborhoods wherever violence might happen and really mediate conflict. And these are people that are not the police, but they're often sourced from the local community, and they provide a bit of self-governing energy. And so for him, this is a story of an amazing pivot of someone who went from one field and applied his expertise to another, and also employed a lot of people in these communities who otherwise wouldn't have jobs to play a role in protecting the community from violence. I now call him a little bit of a reluctant hacker because he's having to be in conflict now with cities, with the police, with hospitals about getting his approach scaled up. And there are a lot of people that are really still very territorial about their power and don't necessarily want to see this disruptive innovation scale. The next thing I wanted to mention briefly is just the spirit of copycats. This is something I've noticed in India and Kenya, certainly a lot in Brazil. And I think there's one particular example that demonstrates the power of copying. First of all, it was interesting to learn in my research going back into history that US industrialization was actually built on patent robbers, on people that stole patents from Western Europe and completely illegally commercialized them in the US. And so it's a little bit ironic that now the US is going around and trying to clamp down on other countries for doing similar kinds of behavior. But when I was in India, I saw a really interesting Robin Hood kind of patent robber, someone who reverse engineered pharmaceutical drugs and made them much more affordable and accessible for the poor, and did this totally illegally. And in response to this, because the market was being flooded with these copycat drugs, with these generics, Western pharmaceutical companies had to completely change their pricing. So this is an example of an illegal misfit challenging the monopolistic control of an industry, but doing that in a way that allowed the industry to evolve, that allowed the industry to develop more affordable and accessible products because of these types of Robin Hoods. The next thing I wanted to mention briefly is around the spirit of provocation. So this is very much asking the question why. And going and reading throughout history, people that do this well are con artists. People that get us to imagine completely fictitious futures, that get us to imagine alternatives. There was a famous con artist, for example, who tried to sell the Eiffel Tower as scrap metal and got tons of money for that. There was another con artist who invented a completely fake colony, a country called Poyais, and got not only settlers to that country, but also investors. And he did this because he created artifacts. Con artists are masters of salesmen, master salesmen that really create these different types of futures. And so he was someone who was able, through this manipulation, was able to really paint this different world for people. And I think within the social change space, oh, can I not move forward anymore? Here we go. Okay, last slide, I promise. Within the social change space, this is something that we need. We need to be able to prototype different futures. Rather than doing scenario work, we have to use misfit subcultures like LARP. Do you guys know live action role playing? Anyone? Yeah, a few. So this is a super nerdy pastime. It's good that you don't know, but maybe you can Google it later and see funny videos. LARPing is basically stereotypically nerds running around in the woods with swords, enacting these fantasy realities. But what if we use LARPs for social change? What if we actually are able to prototype different futures that we might want to live in? So rather than talking about the future of finance, what if we create over the course of a weekend a 2-day experience where people can live within a cryptocurrency world? Or if we want to talk about a more cooperative society, how do you develop a LARP that's set up on emerging principles of egalitarianism? So I think this genre is one that allows us to explore many of the conceptual ideas we have and bring them into reality. The last thing that I wanted to mention was this emerging focus. A lot of this work has brought me into this question: how do we create community? And this is a short video that we're now just launching this research project and this course around this idea of neo-tribes.
Aurinko nousi pian, oksalla syntyi varpunen. Heräsin hetkeksi unissa, silloin eleet. Peilille näytit kasvosi, ja peili hymyn heijasti. Lupasit laulaa kovempaa, rakkauden pensan istuttaa. Aurinko nousi hipien, oksalla syntyi varpunen. Heräsin hetkeksi unissa, silaulelen. Tari tuntuu, liikuis käsi, korvasi maailman ihmeitä. Elo tuntuu, liuteliaan korvan meren pohjan salaisuudet paljasti. Aurinko nousi hipien, oksalla syntyi varpunen. Heräsin hetkeksi unissa, silaulelen. Tarpeeksi kuulla löysit yleistyt helpoinkaan. Äkkiä uusmaalla yöt toivat maan päälle ensijään. Paleana mun poskessaan taas laulelen. Aurinko nousi hipien, oksalla syntyi varpunen. Heräsin hetkeksi unissa, silaulelet.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think now we're in conversation, huh? Great. Perfect.
Hello. Eu sei, gente. Respira.
Do you want this?
A gente queria começar de uma forma dramática, para já começar a já entender que é para sair rasgando mesmo, né? Então assim, pensa com calma, né? Esse bloco é importante, uma informação de cada vez. Esse bloco é o bloco que chama comportamento inovador. Então lembra que a gente está falando sobre você e sua turma. Então, a primeira coisa que você tem que respirar, de tudo que ela está falando, é um comportamento inovador. Passo a passo, até o final do Social Good, vocês vão sair daqui arrasando, vocês com a sua crowd, inovando o que tiver que inovar. Mas passo a passo, primeiro, um comportamento inovador. Respira isso. 1, 2, 3, inspira. Segura, pausa. 2, 3, expira. A gente não está aqui para maltratar você. A gente é tão legal que a gente vai trazer uma pessoa que vai dar assim uma aliviada, uma traduzida, se é que vocês me entendem, para todo esse presente espetacular que a Alexia trouxe para vocês. Vamos chamar ao palco o José Marcelo Zac. Para quem ainda não conhece ele, é uma carinha, um rostinho famoso, que ele é o apresentador do programa Navegador da Globo News. O Marcelo, ele anda caçando inovação por aí, né? As formas mais promissoras, de mais diferentes campos. Então, Marcelo, bem-vindo. José Marcelo Zac, bem-vindo para o palco. Ele vai ajudar vocês a passarem navegando calmamente para todo esse presente que a Alexa trouxe. Uma salva de palmas para Marcelo Zac, por favor. Você vai, eu tenho certeza.
Bom, boa tarde a todas e a todos. Fico muito feliz de ser uma pessoa bem-vinda aqui no encontro. E queria, obviamente, antes de tudo, começar agradecendo o convite, parabenizar toda a iniciativa do Social Good Brasil, conversando com a Cecília e com outras pessoas. Eu dizia, acompanho nesses 3 anos, sempre com muita atenção, com muito interesse no trabalho, com muito entusiasmo, então é uma alegria muito grande estar aqui. Eu queria, além de saudar a apresentação da Alexa, a gente vai abrir aqui rapidamente para algumas perguntas nessa partida do diálogo do seminário, mas fazer alguns comentários. O primeiro, ouvindo a falar sobre a inovação na franja, aqui a ideia do comportamento inovador, né? Uma coisa que me vem à cabeça é que a gente sempre pensa muito, quando pensa em Vale do Silício, tecnologia, a gente rapidamente pensa em geeks, em nerds, etc., que já são personagens de alguma forma na franja, né, do convívio, do comportamento cotidiano, mas é sempre interessante observar como, no fundamento de quem pensou uma boa parte do que foi a gestação, a apropriação da internet como uma ferramenta de ampliação de liberdade, de conexão no mundo, de criatividade, etc., e que são atores hoje importantes de pensamento de fundação do Vale do Silício, são uma comunidade de ex-hips e de pessoas que tiveram à frente dos movimentos contraculturais nos anos 60 nos Estados Unidos e particularmente na Califórnia, não por coincidência, que abriga o Vale do Silício e todo esse movimento que a gente está vendo. Então, acho que essa é uma história que conta bastante dessas conexões. Eu lembrava também, eu tive a oportunidade ao longo da primeira década desse século, né, de acompanhar muito de movimentos novos populares de música, de cultura no Brasil, e era fantástico ver como, apropriando-se da possibilidade de novas tecnologias e de gravar e distribuir conteúdo de maneira autônoma, à margem das grandes gravadoras, à margem do sistema tradicional de comercialização de música, à margem da mídia, né, você teve um fenômeno monumental de criadores e de músicos das franjas urbanas culturais, ou das periferias urbanas culturais geográficas desse país, se tornando muito rapidamente os grupos, as músicas, as linguagens mais populares e com maior capacidade de alcance no país, sem que durante muito tempo quase ninguém do disco voador, do mainstream cultural e da indústria de mídia fosse capaz de se dar conta daquilo. Eu acho que conta muito disso também. E mais recentemente a gente vê como, no ambiente do debate político, como há grupos na franja do espectro do sistema político, de todos os lados, da direita, esquerda, de quem recusa essa clivagem, etc., no Brasil, conseguiram se apropriar dos mecanismos novos de mídia de comunicação de maneira muito mais dinâmica, muito mais inovadora e ocupar o espaço. Eu lembrava, por último, você falava da criatividade presente em ações marginais, mesmo criminosas, né? De um verso do Mano Brown, dos Racionais MCs, tem uma música que chama Eu Estou Ouvindo Alguém Gritar Meu Nome, que é um criminoso, um bandido, baleado, e ele está ali à beira da morte, no final da música ele morre, né, com memórias meio... E ele fala na música de um amigo, de um colega dele, que era a grande liderança lá, e uma hora ele diz, né, ele tinha um certo dom para comandar, tipo linha de frente em qualquer lugar, aqui na área acontece muito disso, inteligência e personalidade mofando atrás da porra de uma grade. Né, que é um pouco uma crônica dessa criatividade presente nas franjas. Agora, o que eu acho que é uma grande notícia do que a gente está, do tema aqui do seminário, das possibilidades do muitos para muitos e da inovação absolutamente descentralizada, distribuída ao alcance realmente de todos. Estou aqui com o celular, queria pedir que quem quiser manda pergunta, eu vou recebê-las aqui, está ao meu alcance, está ao alcance de todo mundo mandar perguntas pela hashtag Social Good BR. Que as fronteiras entre franja e centro, entre franja, entre periferia e mainstream se borram de fato bastante, né? Quer dizer, é viável para esses atores ou para qualquer ator criativo, sem necessariamente estar à margem ou marginalizado ou marginalizável pelo sistema, produzir inovação, criatividade e muito rapidamente disseminar, distribuir isso. Acho que essa é a grande oportunidade, a oportunidade também de um mundo que, quero crer, Alexa, consegue abraçar atos de inovação, né, de subversão em certo sentido, né, de fazer diferente, de criar coisas, comportamentos, com reconhecimento do potencial benévolo daquilo para a busca de soluções públicas, de maneira muito mais positiva do que a gente tinha meio século, quando os movimentos culturais se afirmavam, ou um século, quando grupos modernistas tentavam desafiar cânones, ou um século e meio, quando poetas malditos europeus eram marginalizados. Acho que hoje a gente tem uma atitude mais positiva para esses movimentos que, saídos da franja, produzem novidade e produzem criação. Então, acho que essa é a grande oportunidade do seminário, a gente vai abrir aqui, e eu queria fechar o comentário chamando a atenção para coisas que me parecem positivas no cotidiano do país, né? A gente vai ver nesses 2 dias, eu não vou aqui me alugar em exemplos, a gente no navegador se dedica muito a mapear, explorar e tentar chamar a atenção para exemplos de inovação nesse sentido, de buscar soluções coletivas usando esse recurso pelo Brasil, né? Alguns dos casos que vão estar aqui no seminário já foram pautados por nós lá com muita alegria, mas acho que o seminário tem uma curadoria, um repertório fabuloso de experiências, então não vou aqui me alugar em exemplos, mas 3 coisas que eu queria destacar e depois um par de desafios para fechar, né? Uma é a própria semeadura desse espírito de inovação. Eu acho que a gente pode e deve ter muito mais isso no país. Nós somos muito criativos culturalmente, em outros, mas do ponto de vista de fazer coisas diferentes, de propor modelos organizacionais novos, criar soluções, chamar para si a tarefa de fazer isso e apoiar isso, reconhecer a importância estratégica que isso tem para a construção de soluções públicas, sociais, coletivas no país e para o desenvolvimento, é algo que a gente ainda pode expandir muito, e todo esse movimento tem uma baforada que me parece positiva nesse sentido, né? Uma segunda, uma coisa que eu chamaria de atitude, de cultura cívica, a ideia do faça você mesmo, né? Esse chamado para que, é claro, né, também pautamos muito navegador, e eu na minha vida me dedico muito a esforços que tem a ver com fazer com que o Estado, com que governos, com que políticas públicas, com que a vida política funcione melhor. Isso é fundamental, né? Agora, esse é um lado da moeda. O outro lado da moeda é tudo aquilo que você pode chamar para si a tarefa de desenvolver, seja criando um app que vai propor soluções de mobilidade e de trânsito novas, seja produzindo mobilização para cuidar da praça ou dos espaços públicos do bairro e assim por diante. E sociedades democráticas, sociedades vibrantes, são sociedades onde, além de construções mais complexas, mais amplas, estatais, políticas, etc., funcionais, você tem na base, no fundamento, esse tipo de atitude, de ação no dia a dia. E eu acho que esse movimento que a gente está pautando aqui hoje, nesses 2 dias, embute um sentido da gente produzir muito mais isso no Brasil. E uma terceira coisa, a ideia de negócios sociais que vai aparecer aqui, essa ideia fundamental de que é possível atuar no mercado e produzir bem público ao mesmo tempo, ou talvez essa seja a grande razão de ser da existência do mercado, a gente tem que lembrar sempre disso, fazer com que o mercado sirva, afinal de contas, para produzir bem público e não para canalizar interesses ou ações privadas espúrias. Essa ideia de conjugar a ação no mercado com a produção de bem público é uma coisa que oxigena o mundo, eu diria, e que também vem a reboque disso que a gente está falando aqui. Então, são alguns aspectos que eu queria destacar antes da gente aqui rapidamente passar para um par de perguntas iniciais e seguirmos nesses 2 dias. Eu queria, Alexa, vou aqui começar a ler aqui, buscar ler 2 perguntas, mas enquanto eu as busco aqui, te fazer uma pergunta que tem a ver com se você teria sugestões ou propostas específicas no sentido de como fomentar mais esse tipo de comportamento e, digamos, a abertura para esse tipo de processo de inovação criativa num contexto como o brasileiro, ou em qualquer contexto local, nacional, né? Mas que tipo de coisa pode ser feita na sociedade ou por governos, ou por organizações, por corporações, para que a gente amplie o espaço para que essas coisas possam nascer e ganhar mundo?
Yeah, I mean, I think at an individual level, it's already happening. You know, the misfit revolution is in the air as people are trying to bring more of their unique selves into the workplace. And so, you know, what are some of the other things? I was recently, for example, in outside Paris, where a bunch of eco-hackers gathered for 5 weeks to build climate change solutions called POC21, and it was in response to the climate change talks. People were saying, rather than just talk and negotiate about climate change. Let's build prototypes that can get people to live in the kind of zero carbon society that we want to live. And so there were all these amazing, evolved makers, engineers, people that were building these different things from, solar energies and DIY gardens and really fantastic projects. But one of the problems was the maker community was still pretty exclusive. And so we kept asking this question, how do we transition? We're here for 5 weeks. How do we think beyond just this production assembly line? We're still, even in this amazing immersive experience, we're still thinking as with factory discipline. We've just recreated factory dynamics at this amazing eco-hacker immersion. And so the question here was, how do we take these solutions and bring more communities into them who might not be seeking them or might not know about them? And I think a lot of it is about language. Like, I think everyone here in this room is, an ambassador for this emergent movement. And so how do we use that power and that place of connection to invite people into this space? And what are the languages that activate different types of communities? I think there's a huge role to play in crafting invitations, and there's also a huge role to play in education, in training people with these more disruptive skills and transforming our school systems so that people are actually taught how to be deviants in a positive way.
Great. Bom, a gente tem agora timer aqui, 7 minutos e 18 segundos, 17, 16. Para essa rodada. Isso aqui é uma partida do encontro, então a gente vai seguir o diálogo nesses 2 dias. Eu queria tentar fazer mais 2 perguntas aqui para a Alexa. Então a gente vai aqui rapidamente. Uma explorando o potencial criativo, inovador e, quem sabe, revolucionário de ações na origem marginais. Marginais aqui não necessariamente no sentido de criminosos, mas no sentido de à margem do sistema. Tem uma pergunta aqui que é: como que você vê o aumento das criptomoedas, né, cryptocurrencies, como o Bitcoin e outras, e sua influência tanto no mercado negro quanto potencialmente numa assimilação pelo mainstream do sistema de pagamentos e de finanças?
Yeah, I think with some of these fringe innovations, it's again the same question of mainstreaming. I've been in tons of conversations about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and Ethereum and these new kinds of social contracts, but unless you let me live that reality, unless I can feel what it would be like to use this currency every day and experience an alternative financial system, it's still very hard. And so this is why I really like the idea of LARPing, of creating these prototypes where we have these immersive experiences of some of these different fringe kinds of movements.
Maravilha. Mais um aqui, agora explorando as conexões com o mundo corporativo e com o mercado. A primeira te pede um pouco mais de detalhes sobre como você imagina se é possível fazer a ponte entre economias, ou a economia informal e a economia formal, ou economias informais e formais. E há alguma outra que está um pouco ligada a isso, que é como promover ou levar esse espírito inovador para o universo investidor, de investimento.
Yeah, I think really important questions, and the idea is how we create these bridges, right? So within innovation spaces, how do we create those as safe spaces for people that are from informal economy, from marginalized economy? Also, how do we create these spaces within some of these communities so they don't always have to go outside to experience some of this? I think more and more you're seeing this appetite for informal entrepreneurs to become part of, to become recognized in very different ways. So for example, in Ecuador, the government now works with gangs and actually requires gangs to pay taxes on some of their informal enterprises. So rather than just destroying the gangs and those organizations and those cultures, they're finding a way of working with them. I think similarly, you're seeing a lot of social entrepreneurs that are working with informal laborers, specifically in like the waste market, for example, and really using, or in the example of Cure Violence, you know, using people from that community to help police that community. So I think we've really abandoned this idea that kind of these informal markets need this kind of white knight savior, and instead we're saying how can they develop these different services themselves, because they already have incredible economies. We just don't know about them really.
Maravilha, e tem uma última aqui, trazendo a conversa para o Brasil. Vai ser difícil, esse é um debate eterno de sociologia do Brasil, então você vai, em 3 minutos vai ser puxado, mas nós costumamos falar aqui no Brasil, tem uma expressão que é vamos ver como é que os tradutores vão trazer, o jeitinho brasileiro, né? Mas o sentido é que o Brasil teria uma habilidade de contornar regras ou problemas de maneira criativa, não necessariamente lícita, não necessariamente cívica, não necessariamente, mais criativa e, né, estou usando aqui a linguagem corporal que ilustra bem o espírito da coisa. E isso é algo que, ao longo da história do Brasil, pode surgir na fala como uma expressão de certo orgulho, né, somos criativos, originais, ou de certo lamento, né, não somos cívicos, não somos disciplinados, etc. A pergunta aqui é se o jeitinho brasileiro seria um comportamento inovador, e se o Brasil é uma parte grande da misfit economy.
Yeah, Brazil is definitely a huge part of the misfit economy, and this is the reason that I have so many Brazilian friends, and I try and work a lot with Brazilian people because of this Brazilian way. It's like I spend a lot of time in Germany also, which is maybe the opposite of the Brazilian way, like super rule focused. But I love the spirit of improvisation, you know, the spirit of like entrepreneurship, of being able to sort of take risks and figure it out. There's a word in India for this, jugaad, as well. Basically, anywhere you go in the world's informal economies, there's a special word for this kind of like hustling, go-around activity. And so that's definitely more of what I want to see emerging into mainstream business. Because we're trying to bring this emerging future down to earth. And so to me, this is the sentiment that can do it. So maybe the Brazilian sort of heart and vibe helps create it, and then after it's set up, the Germans can like execute it a little bit. Yeah.
7 vezes os alemães podem executar isso. Mas sem piadas, eu ia brincar com a Alexa que a referência alemã é uma referência delicada no Brasil na atualidade. Mas de qualquer forma, acho que tem uma metáfora que não resisto a fechar com ela, que, enfim, de fato, quando fomos ou quando somos capazes, brasileiros ou alemães, de conjugar criatividade, molejo, jogo de cintura com disciplina e eficiência, né, acho que a gente produz não só inovação, mas resultados claramente melhores, ou 7 vezes melhores. Então, acho que eu tentaria sintetizar com esse exemplo um pouco esse espírito desse balanço entre as duas coisas, né? Que acho que é muito do espírito do encontro de produzir a inovação de maneira criativa, distribuída, vibrante, de muitos, e ao mesmo tempo para muitos, portanto com escala, com eficiência, com capacidade de replicação, de método, de disseminação e de ganhar mundo. Eu acho que o espírito aqui está muito presente na ideia, na proposta do seminário que a gente vai seguir nesses 2 dias. Mais uma vez, um prazer grande. Vai ser uma pena, não vou poder ficar aqui hoje à noite, então não vou ter o prazer de estar com a Alex no lançamento, mas queria reforçar o convite para todo mundo, agora às 7h30, o lançamento do livro aqui no Brasil, e seguimos com o diálogo no seminário e em contínuo na rede, produzindo essa caminhada, essa inovação e essa eficiência para muitos e para todos e todas. Obrigado de novo, gente. Vamos lá.
Obrigado, Alessio. Obrigado, Zé Mário.